Oh, hey everybody. My name is Catherine Sutton and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the senior UX UI designer at Design Group. I joined the team in 2021 and I've been in the web design world for about 8 years now, and I live in Des Moines. Today's webinar is focused on design and strategy. I want to talk about 5 ideas in web design that, when carefully curated and crafted, have the potential to get you closer to your goals and idea of success. As we get started, picture your current website's look and feel, performance, content, functionality, as I ask you these questions. 1, does your site leave users feeling satisfied or frustrated? 2, is your brand engaging or is it constrained by short-sighted design? 3, compared to your peers, is your site ahead in the game or looking outdated? And 4th, is your site targeting your audience's wants and needs, or is it perhaps looking more like a collection of dusty file cabinets? If you're imagining parts of your site that are awkward or bad looking, cluttered or anemic, I have really good news for you. Design and strategic thinking can help. There are endless areas of focus within design and strategy to leverage, and chances are you'll get a unique opinion on what's really the best or most important. But for the time we have today, I will introduce you to 5 ideas that are important to me when creating and evaluating work for the web. They are typography, color, white space, copywriting, and media. Typography is the selection of fonts and the system of sizes and weights that are applied to your site. The genre of type that you choose and practical applications to the text are important choices that impact how users navigate your content and get a sense of who you are. Color quickly establishes mood, energy, aesthetic, and so on. Color combinations come and go as trends. Others are timelessly associated with brands and ideas. White space is simply the empty space that unifies and separates relationships between content. White space is often overlooked or misunderstood in feedback, so let's clear up some misconceptions as we talk about that today. Copywriting is simply the words that appear in a design and should be written to anticipate the user's needs and expressed in your brand's true voice. Media are the audio-visual assets of a larger work. Typically for a website, this means the images, videos, audio, and graphic design that's used. Before we take a deep dive into our first topic, I want to talk about what makes a website look good, feel good, and delight people. Again, depending on who you ask, you can get dozens of answers on what motivations and talents can make something great. For today, I've identified 3 markers. First, purpose and function. Your site must exist to achieve goals that connect you to your users. Is it maybe for generating donations or partnerships, or helping people conduct research, get information, or stay informed? How about converting users into visitors, members, or patrons of your events and services? Or maybe, do you just want to make a statement, tell your story, inspire others, and remain interesting? Next, your website should not only engage, but satisfy users. Once you understand the purpose of your website, consider the strategy and effort to get what you want from your users and to give them what they want. Know what motivates or excites them and bring that into your work. What kind of people make up your users? What should they be thinking or feeling when interacting with your site? What ideas and emotions should they walk away with when they leave your site? And finally, and very importantly, your website should be unique, a true expression of your brand and stand out from your peers. What personality does your brand have? What does your brand have to say about itself and its outlook on the world? What I hope to accomplish with each topic is to provide some questions to help you get on a better track for your website's goals and help you diagnose problems. Let's get started. First up, we have typography, the foundation of the web as a source of information. At its birth, the internet looked something like this: tiny screens with tiny Times New Roman typed out on just really small screens and browsers. And we're also seeing hyperlinks called out in bright blue. This looks pretty rudimentary, right? A decade went by, and as the internet became more sophisticated and thoughtfully designed for users, sites began to look more like this. A great improvement in this example from MailChimp. Those of us who remember using and building for the web in the early millennia were engaging with low-resolution images and video on small screens and reading pixelated renders of fonts like Times New Roman, Arial, Verdana, and Georgia. As devices, technology, talent, and design have developed, so has typography. Thankfully, there are thousands of beautifully drawn fonts that are optimized for the web, and designers and brands have fully embraced the digital typographic revolution. Have you considered the same for your brand, though? Typography, quite simply, is the clothes that text wears. While much of the web we visit today is heavily media-driven, thanks to social media, a vast number of the remaining websites out there heavily rely on text as a source of information, leveraging style, hierarchy, and readability when selecting and applying type is essential to creating an aesthetically pleasing experience and helping users find what they need. There are two popular themes or approaches to web typography that I want to show you today. I ask you to consider which of these is relevant to your brand and your goals for connecting to your users. The first approach is what I'm calling clean and practical. In this example for City of Boulder, created and launched by Atten Design Group, we are using a single font family called Adele Sans, a functional font focused on being easy to read in small and large sizes and has clear distinctions between lighter and bolder weights. This approach suits the needs of the City of Boulder, a municipal client whose key goal is to provide information and services to its constituents in an accessible and time-efficient way. The opposite approach is what I'm calling the make a statement approach. This is a marketing site for A Likely Story, a brand and web studio based in the UK. The studio is clearly trying to make itself stand out from a competitive field of boutique digital studios. Not only is it doing so with clever copywriting, bright colors, 3D graphics, and eye-catching animations, it also selected an eclectic pair of fonts for its heading and body copy. For more drama, the team exaggerated the size between the primary heading and the supporting paragraph below, making the heading and the focal point of the homepage. Notice in these other examples how brands are playing between these two extremes. A common approach is selecting a more expressive, distinguished font to display headings and a cleaner, more practical font for body copy, so users can skim through paragraphs of text. Think about the fonts your brand is using and ask yourself these questions. 1, does my site use a consistent system of headings to separate content? 2, are body fonts helping users skim and read menus, sections, and pages? 3, is my brand appearing too outdated or basic or maybe even trendy by its font choice? Is the typography authentic to my brand and its purpose? When you can confidently say yes to these questions, chances are your typography is in a solid place. Next up is color. Color is a powerful foundation to design because it quickly conveys meaning, sets a mood, and creates a theme. Color comes and goes as trends do, and so it's important to rely on color that truly expresses your brand and ideas. But how do you apply color to a website then? The first approach is what I would call complex and vibrant. This involves a color palette with 3 or more key colors that are frequently used. The colors tend to be brighter and more saturated. In this example from Atten Design Group, the team referenced a variety of color in the logo and repeated that in diamond shapes down the page. The logo and the cheery colors represent diversity, inclusion, and innovation within the tech industry. Each eye-catching tile frames the text. This type of approach works for brands whose vision is to be energetic, dynamic, and bold. The next approach is what I'm calling Keep it simple. In this example by Harbor Path, the brand is working with a cool, calmer, dark blue against a cream background. The brand utilizes its secondary colors, light yellow and red, in these soft illustrations and icons. This approach may work for brands who seek to be perceived as approachable and professional. There are, however, many ways to consider how to apply your color palette and considering its aesthetic impact. For instance, should your site have a dark colored or black background with bright accents? What if you took a few colors and applied them in a gradient? What about a simpler muted color palette and relying on more color to come through in photography? Or how about illustration and graphic design? Using a far more simple color palette that might just be black, white, and a single key color is also a great way to make a statement. Sometimes less really does a lot more. So chances are your brand already has an existing color palette, but is it really working? Let's run the checklist. Does your brand's color make the right impression? Is your brand's main story or idea supported by the right color palette? Is the color palette something your users will connect with? Next, is your brand's color relevant and authentic? Is your brand too dependent on a certain color that is dull or maybe difficult to work with and could use a refresh, or maybe adding some accent colors? Is your brand too overwhelmed by color that things look inconsistent and messy? Could your color palette use some simplification? Next, is your brand's color applied for an effective user experience? Are important elements like headings, links, and buttons colored? How do you use color to group and separate sections? Are you considering the connection between your site design and any illustrations, icons, or images included? And finally, is your website using color appropriately for accessibility standards? To ensure readability, there must be enough contrast between text and its background. For instance, you should never use white text on a yellow background, but black text on a yellow background is okay. There are tools online to show you where colors pass or fail contrast standards. When you can confidently say yes to these questions, chances are your use of color is going in the right direction. Up next is white space, the space that creates and separates relationships between content. Putting objects close to one another creates a large piece, and adding space between objects creates separation and distinction between those objects. When we lay out these pieces big and small, we can create interesting layouts that establish hierarchy, a user journey, and even a story. Designers are absolutely passionate about white space, but it can be overlooked by clients and can be difficult to assess and recognize its value. For example, a common point of feedback I've heard from clients is that there's just too much white space, that everything doesn't fit on the page, and that white space is wasted space. In today's web, we can expect users to scroll, especially when they're engaged with the content. Therefore, we are free to consider how white space will reinforce the brand and the function of the page. But what will work for your site and your brand? Let's look at a couple ideas. First, let's talk about this rich and dense approach, taken from this example by Texas Monthly's digital newspaper. This direction involves packing lots of content into a view by dividing the layout into 4 columns and stacking content within each column. Users may start looking at this large piece on the left and flowing to the column of text on the right, skimming and considering each image and a headline. For cases in which browsing a list of content is essential to the user experience, this approach will probably work. You may see this approach on blogs and news sites, media and education libraries, search results, event calendars, and more. There's a different approach in which white space is used for aesthetic purposes as well as functional ones, in this great example by Stacks.com. This page's purpose isn't to show the latest announcements and updates or offer a bunch of choices for the user, but instead it's meant to tell a linear story and drive people to discover the brand. To achieve this, the design is built with large, simple sections of content with ample space around the text and graphics. Another remarkable use of large white space that not only tells a story, but sells millions of products a year is Apple. Just like its products, Apple's marketing pages focus on simplicity, clever storytelling, and rich graphics, surrounded by elegant space and air. Now that you've seen some examples of how white space can be used, let's take a look at some things to look for in your site. 1, does my website use white space to create relationships between elements and content? 2, is white space used consistently and systematically? Is it used appropriately to separate or unite content? 3, what pages on my site could use a more complex layout versus a more simple layout? An important thing to remember is that white space is absolutely a design element and it has visual impact. And so it should be thoughtfully considered and implemented. Up next is copy. Generally, we think of writing to inform or persuade the reader, which is a really good place to start. But when we think more deeply about what's best for web copy, we instead should think of conveying your brand's personality and guiding the users to the actions you want them to take in a conversational tone. Before you begin writing, consider what questions users may have when visiting your site and what else might come up as more information is revealed. It may be helpful to create an empathetic purpose statement that says something like, my communication will be successful if this type of user or this type of person or this type of a person from my audience type will take this action. When you're ready to create some headings, intro paragraphs and sentences, calls to action buttons, remember that you're writing for a dynamic medium, not a book or a magazine. This means that users come to your website with their personal set of questions and tasks that they want to accomplish, and they're using your site to finish those tasks or discover your brand. Most people won't come to your site to read it from top to bottom or page by page or in a linear fashion, but instead scan it for what they need. Content should be short and sweet as possible, written in a conversational tone based on your brand's unique voice. Order ideas by what's most important to the user with headings, subheadings, lists, and short paragraphs. Ultimately, the content should be structured and written for the user to understand, relate to, and engage. Word choice should be as simple as possible. Some people think that this is dumbing things down for your users, and we know that our users are the smartest people in the world, but instead, this is actually a considerate and deliberate choice to make the experience for your users as breezy and easy as possible. Simple language keeps your users' attention for much longer and allows them to capture and retain information. So you should avoid business jargon and acronyms that confuse and alienate users who aren't as familiar with your work. And if you must use acronyms or special terms, spell them fully and define them at the first instance. When writing for smaller areas like calls to action, always tell your user what to do and indicate where they're going with action words, like these examples. Avoid vague and unhelpful tropes on the web that we've seen everywhere, like click here or learn more. Let's look at an example from a project that we did with Vertafore, an insurance technology company that has built dozens of products. Here's excerpt text from a marketing page that describes 2 products. These 2 paragraphs are packed with long sentences, sophisticated words, unfamiliar product names, and niche business jargon. By this point, the user has already seen plenty of content. So how can we hold on to their attention and generate excitement about these products? By getting to the essence of what we're really saying and cutting until we couldn't cut anymore, we proposed this revision to the client and they were delighted. Later, we teamed up with Vertafore to provide a how-to writing workshop to prepare them for a successful new site. In our writing workshop with Vertafore, we helped them understand that when it comes to text, each word should be purposeful and carefully chosen formatted, and formatted to be scanned. Here are some key insights we shared. First, text should anticipate your user's wants, needs, and questions at the right place and the right time. Next, text should be laid out and written shortly and sweetly for scanning eyes. Thirdly, when writing text for links or actions, always be clear about what will happen next. And lastly, the text should be conversational and match your brand's personality with empathy and brevity. And now finally, let's talk about media. The images, videos, audio, and graphics that appear on your site. The web has evolved into a highly visual medium, so it's important to source media that is beautiful, interesting, and connects with your audiences. On the flip side, if media is poorly executed, pixelated, or clashes with the existing brand, the overall quality of the site slides, even when other design elements are well set into place. Graphic design and illustration are great approaches, which can give your site a cohesive look and feel and provide depth to your brand. Graphic design and illustration can provide a strong pop through something like a collage of images associated with your brand, or a series of motifs, characters, people, or drawings to abstractly represent the ideas and functions of your brand. Or media can head listings for news posts, research libraries, and posted content. Custom graphics can also drive the point home and emphasize the larger heading. Next, visuals can more literally and practically say who you are and what you do. This can be screenshots, images, or video of your product and features. Or it could be something like charts, maps, and data visualization that can highlight key metrics. Video and audio is also a great tool to provide engaging content to your users. Video and audio can be used to tell your story or the stories of your community, serve as a learning or a tutorial resource, a thought leadership piece, and so on. Consider video, animation, or a podcast to share your ideas, whether that be on a blog or a gallery on your homepage. Photography, of course, is the most common and obvious choice for media, and the most easily sourced, whether that be from professional photographers, stock photo libraries, or creatively shot amateur images. Most of the time, we see photography making literal connections with the text or ideas. Alternatively, you can choose photography that gives your brand more personality, conveys a mood or idea, and make your website stand out. Now that we've covered a few approaches to media, how are things looking on your website? What should you be pursuing next? Let's look at this checklist. First, be sure your media has a purpose and serves users. Media can help answer a question, visualize what you're talking about, and captivate audiences. Next, test your media for quality, performance, and accessibility. For users who don't perceive the web visually, make sure your images are tagged with the right alt text, and never, ever, ever, ever put text in a graphic if that's the only way to read it. Another big one, is your media on brand? Does it work with your color palette, voice and tone, and aesthetic? And finally, consider a system of media with a number of different circumstances in mind. For instance, you may want a large photo for the top of your homepage, then some custom graphic design for blog posts, then maybe a series of icons to point out your brand's features. They should all be connected by theme and aesthetic and not clash with one another. Let's jump into some final thoughts from me. As we've seen today, it's important to take away that design can play a make or break role for your website and brand. Good design has been affirmed to capture and maintain people's attention, retain information, make a positive experience, and boost trust. We have seen today how intentionally creating and curating typography, color, white space, copy, and media can significantly shape a site's look and feel and user experience. What I hope this webinar accomplishes is that it helps you understand what basic ingredients are necessary for today's web, and that it empowers you to make bold decisions so your site can stand out from your peers and become a true expression of your brand. As you think, what's next about what's next for your website and its content, know that you don't have to be alone. We at Atten Design Group are a team of talented designers, strategists, and developers who are passionate about client service. We offer top to bottom web design, branding reviews, design audits, UX strategy, stakeholder workshops, user research, and more to help you identify your goals and tap into the potential of your brand story. If you have questions about today's webinar, feel free to contact me. And if you're interested in partnering with Atten Design Group, reach out at work@atten.io.